Why is it that in Parliament there's no outcry against the men who raped white girls in 74 towns? If Englishmen raped girls from my community, even in one town, there'll be an outcry in Parliament. Men from my community would be out on the streets rioting. Yet the British white people are too afraid to go onto the streets and peacefully protest.
Next up, we have an ex-Muslim Pakistani member of the Lost Day Silence March, Mo Fyaz. He's asked me to read this out beforehand. So, Professor Dawkins was banned at an event in Berkeley in USA, featuring Professor Richard Dawkins, was cancelled after organisers learned about his critical views on Islam. Professor Dawkins, well known as an atheist, evolutionist and outspoken critic of all religions, was to appear on stage on the 9th of August to talk about his latest book, Science in the Soul, collected writings of a passionate rationalist. In a statement, he said, "I am known as a frequent critic of Christianity and I've never been deplatformed for that. Why do you give Islam a free pass? Why is it fine to criticise Christianity but not Islam?"
I don't have a speech prepared or a script, but I'll speak as it is. One of the things that really scares me and I hate, two words I really hate the most, is political correctness, which has allowed debate to be stifled. Any criticism against Islam is shut down by words like "you are a racist, you're a far right." We need to put this political correctness back where it belongs, and that's in the bin. I will tell you a bit about who I am and the history of my parents, etc. When we are brought up in Islam, we are taught to read the Quran in Arabic. We are not taught to understand the Arabic tongue, but we are taught to read it. We are taught that this is an amazing book from Allah. It's got wonderful words in there, words of poetry. We are taught this. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, Rabbil Alameen. Either this will draw attention or it will get the armed officers on their feet. I hope they don't train their pistols towards me. Now, you ask what I have just said. I don't have a clue. When I looked into Islam, and in translations in English, I could not believe what we were reciting every single day in the mosque. It was unbelievable. We were reciting things like chopping off heads. Jews are pigs, Christians are monkeys. And I'm thinking, what's so wonderful about these words that we are reciting every single day in the mosque? The good news is, millions around the world are turning away from Islam. This propaganda that Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world is a false statement. When you take out the head count, those who have secretly turned away from Islam around the world, who either have turned to atheism or Christianity, the number of Islamic followers around the world drops drastically. If it was free to turn away from Islam in places like Iran, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Islam would collapse. It only exists by force and fear. Let's now talk about the grooming of the white girls. What made the Pakistani men from my community to go and rape and torture white girls between the ages of 12 and 18 in 74 different British towns? What made them do that?
Islam.
I tell you what made them do that. Not just Islam, not just the example of Muhammad, the immoral example that he set. We as young boys are taught that the white people are dirty, they're filth. That those who do not belong to Islam are beneath us, especially the white people. We are taught that the white girls are nothing, that they wear short skirts, go to clubs, drink and sleep around. They are worth nothing. This is one of the ingredients that inspired Muslim men from my community to torture and rape white girls. Nothing more and nothing less. Islam in itself didn't help either, because when you look into Islam, it degrades women. There is no equality there. Those of you who expect Theresa May or Donald Trump or any world leader to stand up and say Islam is a problem or Islam is evil is counterproductive. It's irresponsible. No world leader will say that, because a world leader has a responsibility of duty to keep the peace on the streets of Britain, not create havoc. Even if they knew that Islam was a problem, they have to lie. So please don't expect them to say Islam is a problem. It's not going to happen. The only world leaders that dared to speak out were two, as I am aware of. William Gladstone, 4 times Premier of Great Britain, in the 1800s, held up the Quran in the Houses of Parliament and said these words: "This is an accursed book. As long as it exists, we will not have any peace in this world." Look what's happened a few hundred years later. Winston Churchill was even stronger with his words. He said this: "Islam in a man is as dangerous as rabies in a dog." Was he a racist?
No.
I like to see the far left. I like to see them attempt to pull down his statue and the statue of William Gladstone. Why aren't they called the far right and racist? They spoke with the same tone as we do today. We need to wake up. Britain needs to wake up. Britain is slowly waking up. Many of the white people I engage with strangers. At first they are reluctant to say anything about Islam because of the fear of being called a racist. As soon as I tell them who I am, then you hear the truth coming out of them, the concerns they have. Theresa May says we are being too tolerant against extremism. Enough is enough. Then we must also deal with the extremist attacks upon those who leave Islam in this country. 3 of my friends were almost killed. 1 was stabbed, left for dead. Her husband was arrested, put in prison for attempted murder. He then asked to be transferred to the Iranian prison. The British authorities agreed just to get him out of the country because he posed a real threat to his wife and his daughter. As soon as he arrived in Iran, he was freed. Why was he freed? Because it was okay to kill anyone that turns away from Islam. Muhammad himself said, there are 3 justified reasons why you can spill the blood of a Muslim. 1 for murder, 2 for adultery, and 3 for those who turn away from Islam. All too often we hear the imams quote certain parts of the Quran saying there is no compulsion in religion. That is utter nonsense when it comes to the apostates, the ones who have turned away from Islam. Because that part of the scripture relates to those who are Jews, who are Christians, who are pagans, that they don't have to turn to Islam. This is when Muhammad was weak. He was friendly towards the Jews, the Christians, until he created a big army. That's when he went on the offensive. when they quote the part of the scripture where it says if you kill one, it's as if you kill the whole mankind. Now that part of the scripture, I don't know if you know, is taken from the Jewish teachings. A lot of the stuff that's in the Quran has been taken either from the Christian teachings, the Jewish teachings, or the pagan rituals. Muhammad attributed that as he heard it from God. Absolute nonsense. We have a man here who claims to be a prophet of Islam, prophet of God. And yet when you look at his behavior, his character, anyone that's got common sense can see right through it. But this man was a con man. Anything he wanted, he said, Allah said I could have it. I'll give you an example. When he went to his son, his adopted son, he was attracted to his wife. And he went over to his son, he says, Allah says that I must have your wife. His adopted son, he divorced his wife, and Muhammad took her upon his wife. Now if that's not a cult leader, a con man, I don't know what is. We must stand together. One thing I hate is racism. I stand against any form of racism, whether it's from the whites against the Pakistani community I'm from, or from the Pakistani community towards the whites. If there's anything, I challenge my community, the Pakistani community, albeit the Islamic communities. Lay down your agenda to Islamify Britain. Change your attitude towards anyone that does not follow your Islam. Sort out the racism that exists amongst our community. Sort out the poison that exists in our community. Sort out the attitudes that you have towards anyone that turns away from Islam. A friend of mine recently, a year ago in Bradford, was brutally attacked outside his home, almost killed. 15 years later, he had to be escorted out of Bradford. He was forced out of Bradford under 8 armed guards. You can see that on the internet. It's on the internet. Google it, you'll find it. He was being escorted by 8 armed guards. Why is that happening here? This is not Iran. This is not Saudi Arabia. Why is this happening here? Why is it that in Parliament there's no outcry against the men who raped white girls in 74 towns? If Englishmen raped girls from my community, even in one town, there'll be an outcry in Parliament. Men from my community will be out on the streets rioting. Yet the British white people are too afraid to go into the streets and peacefully protest because of the fear of racism, fear of losing their jobs. This is why it's important for people that have ditched Islam to come alongside you lot and defend what you are concerned about. Unless members of my Pakistani community come out who have turned away from Islam and speak out, we will have problems on the streets of Britain in 10 to 20 years' time. I met a guy, I won't say whereabouts, and he's an atheist. He has left Islam, but he still lives within the community pretending to be a Muslim because of consequences. He told me that he knows 1,300 personally men that have turned away from Islam and the women who have turned to atheism, but they pretend to be within the umbrella of Islam because of fear of attacks. I believe there's more than 1,300. I believe there's thousands upon thousands in this community that do not practice Islam, that have turned to atheism or Christianity, but they are silent because they are afraid. I want to challenge those people and encourage them to come out and stand for what they believe in. Even with the officers, I engage with police officers on a one-to-one. And when I explain to them who I am and I put them at ease, they tell me the concerns they have. They have the same concerns as we have, but they cannot say, which is understandable. They can't. They have to remain neutral. But make no mistake, many police officers do understand. It's the chief constables that are at the top who are politically driven, that have their own agenda. It is political correctness from the chief constables aligned with political parties that have allowed the rape and torture of white girls in 74 British towns. How can this happen? Absolutely disgusting. As I said, I didn't have a speech prepared, but I said it as it is. And I encourage you to do not be afraid of standing up for what you believe. Yes, there are people that are scared to lose their jobs. What really fears me is this. At the moment, we don't have an issue of civil unrest on the streets between the British white people and the Islamic communities. The reason is this. People have got a lot to lose. Jobs. And they've got rents to pay, mortgages. But I'll tell you this. When the right conditions come, when there's a high unemployment rate within 10 to 20 years, those very people will have nothing to lose. That's when it will start to kick off. And this is what we need to avoid and speak against. Because the Muslim extremists want to turn this beautiful land, peaceful land, into hellholes that you see in Syria, Libya and Iraq. And in every opportunity we must speak out against the fascist right, or whatever you want to call them. We need to encourage them to lay down their agenda of attacking, revenge for revenge. If we stand up as peaceful people, a mass movement, because there's one thing a government fears the most, and that is a mass movement of peaceful people on the streets, because that potentially can bring London to a standstill. And that's the only time that any establishment will listen. So let's create a mass movement of peaceful people on the streets. One of the things that I've noticed, that you've got groups springing up here and there and everywhere, and they're always organized by the whites. I'm not against whites, by the way. They're always organized by the whites. Most of the attendances are whites. And I'm not the one for starting a street, a movement, but I felt there's a need there. So I've started a movement, a group. I'd like everyone to search for it on Facebook. It's called MATE, M-A-T-E, Multicultural Alliance Tackling Extremism. Join that group. Let's make it a mass movement.